This meeting is being recorded.
Hi, so this is Mike. As you know, I have a real interest in the Vietnam War. And in the past, I was able to interview both Jim and Lee about their experiences. And today we brought on also Daniel Johns and John Honaker. And we're going to talk about a firefight that occurred on April 23rd, 1967. So we're going to start with just a brief introduction. So Lee, if you could start with a brief introduction.
Sure. I was 21 when I was drafted, just after my junior year in college, and was sent to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, where I was inducted. There about 10 days, and then they sent me to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, where I had basic and AIT and leader school. And then from there, I pretty much had 30 days leave at home. And then the next thing I knew, around the first week of March, I was in Vietnam and signed to the 199th Light Infantry Brigade. And I was a rifleman. And then a few weeks later, became an RTO in Charlie Company.
Okay. Thanks, Lee. How about you, Jim?
See, my name is Jim Rothblatt. I was 22 when I joined the Army. I turned 24 while I was in Vietnam. I was a medic assigned to 2nd Platoon of Charlie 412 on the day that we're going to be talking about.
Thanks, Jim. How about you, Daniel? Can you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. I'm Daniel Johns. I went into the service when in the Army. I joined the Army when I was 18 years old, just to get away from pretty much a dead-end future around home. I couldn't afford college, so I joined the Army and ended up in the infantry and went through basic and then AIT. And then we were sent to Fort Benning, Georgia, where they were reorganizing and reactivating the 199th Light Infantry Brigade. And I was assigned there, and it was pretty much a confused mess for a week or two. We were just roaming all over Kelly Hill, the part of Fort Benning that the 199th was at. Finally, they got us organized into the Brigade Structure, which consisted of battalions, companies, platoons, and squads. And we were all started, and we started a training program at the squad level, and we went through different phases, squad, platoon, company, battalion, and this went on for about close to 5 months, I believe, something like that. And we had about a 3-week stay down in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. That was supposed to be for jungle and swamp training, and it was fairly realistic, more so than Georgia. But then we had about a 10-day leave, I think, and we were shipped. I was put on the board the cruise ship, the Daniel Sultan, and we left Oakland, California, and about 3 weeks later, we landed in Vung Tau, Vietnam, and then we were trucked by convoy to our 199th base camp, which wasn't much more than a big hill, long spread out hill with a bunch of sandbag bunkers and stuff on it. It was pretty much nothing, actually. It was disorganized as hell. But then we started our operations from there. And that would be about the first part of December 1966.
Okay. Thank you. And John, can you introduce yourself, please?
I was a captain in the infantry and rotary wing pilot. And I had about 4 years in service already and came out of Fort Rucker, Alabama as an instructor pilot to the 199th Light Infantry Brigade. And there joined up with the brigade itself And I think General Ryder was in charge at the time. And the deputy commander was a guy named Colonel Rykoff. Anyway, from there, we were airplaned out to Oakland or Travis Air Force Base, and then bused to Oakland, and I got on that same ship he did. And that ship was the Sultan, and it has been scrapped as about 1950 something or another. But it was used in the Korean War, and it was a good ship. And then from there, the Australians protected us up to Long Binh. They gave us protection along the route. And just like John's saw, we had to put up our tents and fill our sandbags. And about the 1st of January, somewhere right in there, they blew up the Long Binh ammunition dump. You probably remember that. But anyway, my function was we are assigned to headquarters company of the 199th Light Infantry Brigade. And within that company, there is an aviation section. And that section had TO&E, which is a table of organization equipment, about 6 H-23Gs, which were a reciprocating engine, small helicopter capable of carrying about 3 people, but mainly for control of the brigade. And then after that, we found we needed some HUEYs involved. So I went down to Vung Tau with one of our other pilots, and his name was Homer L. Clark. And we picked up 2 HUEYs and brought them from Vung Tau Depot and put them in our organization. And those are the aircraft that we used on the 23rd of April. That was 199th Infantry guys that were flying those HUEYs that brought Mr. Johns and Captain Tom Sellers out to the evac hospital. And I think Harrison was in there also with us. But the important thing there is that they were our aircraft. And when we went into this place, we were in support of the whole brigade. In other words, the 2nd or the 3rd Infantry, which was a group that are the people in Washington, D.C. that do the ceremonies, they were there as the 3rd Battalion of the 2nd Infantry, as well as 2 other infantry battalions. The important thing there was it was us doing the flying, except when we first got there, the Razorbacks were in there with gunships, and they were the 120th, I think they were the 120th Aviation Group out of Thompson, and they had gunships. And I was alerted from our Tactical Operations Center that was at Cat Lai, and that was a forward tactical center for the Light Infantry Brigade. The major tactical center was up at Long Binh, but this was what they called the Tactical Operations Center Forward. And that's where the general officer stayed there. And at the time, General Freud was our general. Brigadier General had replaced General Ryder. And I was informed by the gunships that it was not safe to go in, that their window had just been shot out while they went in. And I knew it was Tom Sellers that was down there, and we went in. I said, we're going anyway. So we went in and picked up Tom Sellers, and I think we picked up Mr. Johns there. Is that right?
Among others.
Yes.
Yeah, that's where I saw you. And I saw somebody there loading Captain Sellers, and I believe that was you.
That's,
Can I ask a question? Just on,
go ahead, Jim.
John, I just appreciate so much what you just said, because all there's certain recollections I have from that day.
Yeah.
And one was seeing a chopper come in and start to land and watching the windshield get blown out. And I always thought I might have invented that. And you just confirmed that I
So
actually.
these Razorback guys were, they have a, you know, if you look at the Razorbacks themselves, and they've got a whole lot of stuff on the internet if you look them up. And I had their frequency and I had our ground control frequency that I was talking to. And I even have the maps I had on my lap at that time.
Well, I mean, that just makes me feel so much better about my current mental health.
Yeah, but that's exactly what happened. And that day, I've looked at my record for my aviation, what they call the individual flight record, Army aviator. And on the 23rd of April, I flew 9.4 hours during that day. So the time that I spent with you was a takeoff and a landing, pretty much. But and to get there, but we were delivering ammunition and food and what other essential items we had to do. But we also provided command and control for the brigade commanders. And I don't believe they were on board that aircraft when I went in that day, but I did have myself and Homer Clark, which was on most of those flights with me, as well as two gunners with M60 machine guns hanging out the side. And I told them they could fire, but they had to make sure that they weren't firing on the friendlies before we went in.
Much.
That was nice, wasn't it?
Can I get,
Nice.
hold on for 1 second. Can either Lee and or Daniel kind of lay out what's going on the ground? I mean, what happened? How many troops are there? How many, Viet Cong are there? What was the mission? Why did you do all this?
I can start a little bit, Jim, if you want me to.
Yeah, go ahead.
That day, April 23rd, my squad and I was a squad leader in the 1st platoon of Charlie Company, and we were out on ambush patrol that night. And it came daylight, and we didn't have any activity overnight. We built a fire and we're warming up something to eat out of our sea rations. And we heard the fire break out. We heard the firing weapons break out somewhere to the east of us, I believe. And it maybe a half a mile away. It wasn't too far. We could hear it clearly. And it turned out that the elements of the 2nd platoon had stumbled into an ambush. And as it turned out, from what I gathered, it was a very well organized ambush. We walked into an L-shaped trap where we were on the rice paddy side of a canal, and the Viet Cong were on the other side of the canal, dug in pretty well in bunkers, I assume, because they weren't being touched by much fire. But I received orders over the radio to bring my squad to the location. So we started out, and we didn't have any trouble finding the place. You just headed for the loudest noise. So, and we got to the west edge of the rice paddy, where one of the paddies where the fight was going on, and I led my squad down off of the rice paddy over to link up with some of our company members. I didn't know who they were, but I knew they were there, and we could kind of form a defensive line. Well, I didn't get too far off of that dike when I got blown into the air from the back. The spectators later said I must have been blown about 15 feet in the air. And I don't know yet. I know it was a Chi-Com grenade because they saved the huge chunk out of my back that they took out. And you could look at it and tell it was what they called the pineapple grenade. And it was a big Chinese communist grenade. Anyway, I had Sergeant Johnson, who was my platoon leader. He got to me, and the medic, I believe, was you, Jim. Got to me and he started pumping me full of morphine, which was I was in shock. I know I was in shock. And guys got me somehow, you got me carried to the command post, the CP that was kind of set up behind a dike. Captain Sellers was at the CP. He had been wounded at that time. He was shot. He was shot with rifle shot through the lower left abdomen area, but he was still functioning. And I believe when John, I believe when you got Colonel Boatner onto the ground, correct me if I'm wrong, you brought him in there to take over, didn't you, for Captain Sellers?
He may have been on board, but I don't recall it. But I know that I flew with him and you know, in that area multiple times, but he could have very easily been in there.
Yeah, he was, because I remember Captain Sellers, he was, Boatner was giving some directions and orders of some kind, and I remember Captain Sellers yelling at him and telling him, "This is still my company. I'm still here. I'm wounded, but this is my company." And he kind of directed things from there. And I was, by that time, they gave me another morphine shot, and I was just kind of flying around. I was kind of floating around in air, you know. I didn't much care about anything at the time. I just laid back in the pile of dead and wounded at the CP, and I watched the artillery as it came in. I watched the gunships. It was pretty fascinating. They would go over. They weren't more than about, I'd say less than 100 yards from me, but I could see them clearly going over the tree line, and they were using their rockets on the VC positions. And the door gunners were standing out at the edge of the compartment of the chopper, and they were strapped in with body straps that held them in. So they were pretty mobile, and they were standing up, and their M60 machine guns were on a sling that held them, but they could direct the gun anywhere they wanted to. And they were standing up, firing down right between, almost looked like between their toes. They were shooting straight down because they were right on top of the enemy positions. And it was quite a show, and I was really enjoying that. And then you came in, but I was one of the first out of there, I believe. I went out with Captain Sellers and Harrison, I believe, who was dead. And I remember lying, they put me face down on the floor of the chopper cabin troop compartment, and you took off. And my legs from the knees down were hanging out the door. I wasn't even on board, really. And Harrison was he was dead. He was on the bottom of the pile. And I managed to grab a hold of his belt to keep from falling out. Because that was my main concern at the time, because I didn't want to fall out. And then I can remember saying these words, and they weren't directed at you, John. They were just directed at the helicopter. And I just kept saying, "Climb, you son of a bitch, climb," and get me out of here.
Well, you got to remember the UH-1D had a 1,100 horsepower engine in it. And on a standard day at sea level, it could perform pretty well. But when you put armored seats and 2 pilots and 2 gunners with machine guns and about 3 or 4 other people, you're just about underpowered. But it got out of there, and it took everything it had.
Yeah. You got us out of there, and you flew us to the 93rd VAC.
I'm pretty sure that's right, as I've been in there before.
Yeah, 93rd VAC Field Hospital in Long Bend, in the Long Bend complex.
That's correct. And it wasn't very far away.
Yeah, no, it wasn't very far.
Okay.
And I was unloaded there, and I was taken straight into surgery, X-ray and surgery, and then from then on, it was just everything was kind of a blur. And when I woke up, I was post-surgical, and I was in a ward with a lot of other patients and soldiers that were wounded, and I couldn't walk. I couldn't do anything. The only thing I could do was lay in in bed on my right side. I was totally immobile. I couldn't do anything. And that was kind of rough.
Yeah, no, we're going to get back to this, but so you're how old then? You were 18 then or 19?
I was 18 at the time.
Okay.
No, I was 19. I turned 19 just before we shipped out on October 30th of 1966.
Okay.
I turned 19, and then at this time of this firefight, I was 19 years old, and I was a Spec 4 in rank, and I was a squad leader. That's how things, due to attrition, I went from rifleman to team leader to squad leader because of the way our leaders were disappearing by attrition, getting wounded, taken away, couldn't come back, whatever. But yeah, I was a 19-year-old squad leader then. I'm 74 years old now.
Okay.
So that's a long time ago.
You had been in country about 6 months when this firefight started then.
Yeah, whatever it is, from the first part of December until April, that'd be more like 5 months, I believe.
Yeah, I want to hear from right, we're going to come back to you, but Lee, can you kind of lay the groundwork where you were and all that?
Yeah, I was one of the first group there. We joined up with we were second squad, and we joined up with the rest of second platoon. And there was 2 rice paddies. There were the lower paddy, it's kind of a dry paddy, and then there was an upper paddy which was wet and muddy. And so we decided to sweep, just make a long line. And for some reason, I ended up as the guy on the far right of this flank, and we were going to sweep. And so we come up to this ravine, and it's about 30 feet across, maybe, and maybe about 6 foot deep, and it was pretty much dry. There might have been a little water in the very bottom of it, but so we're getting ready to sweep and go through this ravine and out the other side into that upper muddy paddy, and a python or some type of large snake that appeared to me to be white. It was white or albino or something was on the other side of that ravine. And I'm saying this is about 30 feet from where I was, across to the other side, and it slithered off down in that ravine directly in front of me. So I'm not a real snake person. So that just kind of pushed me to the right. So I just veered maybe 30, 40 feet, something like that, to the right, just to avoid that snake. So we went into that ravine and come out, never saw the snake. I rated my M16 for it, but never saw it. But anyway, what happened when I came out into that upper muddy rice paddy, that put me very close to a dike. And we were always told not to walk on the dikes or near the dikes because they're booby trapped and whatever. But it put me very close to the dike, and I just kind of didn't come back. I just kind of stayed and walked along, and we were kind of on a sweep toward the river, and there was a wooded area there, and behind it was the river. And so we were on the sweep, and we went a little ways, and the next thing I knew, Dan, there was an explosion, and it threw me into the air and blew out a large section of that dike that I was walking right beside. And I also had heard it was a Chi-Com grenade or something. But anyway, it blew this whole section of this dike out, threw me into the air. And of course, I fell back into the mud of the rice paddy. And the thing that really stands out is almost immediately as Captain Sellers and someone else, I'm assuming it may have been Wayne Starr, his RTO, or Byron Burbaum, one, and came over to check on me. And the reason I remember that is because it was so unusual for me to have any contact with the company commander. We just went through the process of squad leader, platoon sergeant, whatever, and platoon leader. And so I didn't have any direct contact with the company commander. So I thought that was unusual. But anyway, they're rolling me over and back in the mud, checking for wounds, and miraculously, I wasn't wounded. It just threw me well into the air, and I landed back, and they rolled me over. And about that time is when Jim Rothblatt showed up, and he may have been the one rolling me over and back. I'm not sure, but somebody rolled me over and back in the mud, and I was kind of mad about it because I was getting mud all over me, and they were checking for wounds, obviously. But that was at the very start. I think that was the very first explosion, I believe, and then a little later, of course, Captain Sellers was wounded, and Dan, and and several others. But I just took my position right there at the dike and began firing and over the dike, and we were close enough at that point that I threw all my hand grenades at whoever was shooting back, and you can't throw a hand grenade very far, so that's how close it was. And so I just let maybe Jim, Jim pretty much arrived, about that time, right after Captain Sellers, and had checked on me, and he went back more to the center of the formation there. And so I'll just let Jim come in here if he wants to.
Yeah, Jim. So tell me what you saw.
Well, we'd been set up in had a perimeter set up around a small pagoda and been running patrols out of there for about a week. And just about every day, patrols took sniper fire. I don't remember anyone getting hit, but it was like, so I remember it as a Sunday morning. I decided I was going to take a day off and not shave. Sellers was pretty strict company commander, so he expected us all to shave if we weren't out on patrol anyway. So lucky me, he notices I didn't shave. So I was digging a 4x which is you dig a 4 foot by 4 foot by 4 foot hole in the ground, and then you fill it up. So that was me not shaving. And one of the patrols was coming in, and they took fire. And Sellers comes out of this pagoda where he had his CP set up and says, "Saddle up, we're going to get them this time." So what was part of 2nd Platoon that was in the perimeter, we took off on a run. I'll never forget it. We didn't usually run with all our gear. So we were strung out in a column. And I saw the first part of the column going up out of the lower paddy that Lee had described to an upper paddy. And I heard a few more shots. And then I took off faster because I just had a feeling something was going to happen and it was going to be up front. And so just as I arrived at the upper paddy, and this is another scene that's embedded in my brain forever, people start screaming medic from all over the place. I mean, which is the worst sound for a medic to hear. I mean, because what are you supposed to do when you're the only one and they're calling for medic? It's like, it's time to show up. There's no place to hide when everyone's yelling for you. And the scene that I saw when I came up, and I wish I could paint it, but it was Sellers standing up with one of the phones in his hand, both RTOs kneeling next to him. And there were columns of mud that looked like some kind of cathedral from hell all over this muddy paddy coming up in the ground. All I can think of is that the VC must have had M79s or something to be throwing that there could be that many explosions going at once. And they were just sending up columns of mud straight up. And Beer Bomb, I'm going, because he was screaming medic when I came in, and he just points. And so I went over to where he was pointed, and that's when I met up with my buddy Lee there, who was firing his M16 over this low dike with a blown hole in it. I don't remember rolling you over, but I remember putting my hand on your back, asking you where you were hit. And you said you weren't hit. And so then I moved on to where the next yelling was coming from. And that was, I got to Harrison, who was shot through the head. And our platoon sergeant was there with him. And it didn't look like there was any way Harrison could survive. He was breathing. he had a really pleasant look on his face, but he had a hole through his forehead and the back of his head was gone. But and he looked he looked like really calm and pleasant. He was having a nice sleep before he quit breathing out there. And, but I bandaged him anyway. And as I was about to leave, someone came by and slapped the sergeant on the back and said, "Move these men up, set up the perimeter." And as soon as they said that to him, he started screaming, "I'm hit, I'm hit, I'm paralyzed." And he said, "I'm paralyzed." I said, "Where are you hit?" And he says, "I don't know." And I didn't like the guy. And I just basically said something charming like, "Fuck you." Oh, before I got to them, after I finished with Lee, I noticed, I think it was Beerbaum saying, "Sellers is down, Sellers is down." So I ran back to where Sellers was, and he was shot through and through. He had a bullet, just missed his belly button, came out his back, just missed his spine. And he's flopping around on the ground. I'm trying to tell him, "Settle down." I'm trying to bandage the guy. By that time, my platoon leader and one of the other platoon leaders showed up. Both said, "We'll take over, sir." And I had this conversation with Sellers, and he denies saying what I believe that he said, but it was, "God damn it, I'm not dead yet. I'm still in charge here." When I told him that some years ago, he said, "No, he didn't say that because he doesn't swear." But I swear the guy swore that day. And that was fit for movie. And Starr was also hit. So I bandaged Sellers and I bandaged Starr. Then I went up to Harrison. Fuck you to the sergeant. Oh, and when I first came into the paddy, I knew I was going to die in that paddy. That there was no way that I could, that was it. I was going to witness my own death. When I left Harrison and I wound up going over to Daniels, I passed what turns out to be Kilpatrick, that was face to face with a Chi-Com Claymore, chopping at the wire with his machete, which I thought was the bravest act I've ever seen. And just right after that, I got blown up also. And I don't know if I was knocked out or not, but when it came to, I could feel a million holes in my body. Blood, I pictured blood pouring out of me, and I waiting for the pain to hit. And I looked at myself, and it turns out I wasn't injured at all. It was bizarre. And then I went over to Johns, who I wound up having to pretty much strip his pants off him. And he was all bloody and messed up. I thought his balls were gone. I basically bandaged him like a diaper, had a couple of shots of morphine in him. And while I'm bandaging him up after the morphine, he's trying to bum a cigarette from guys running by. So when he says he was in kind of La La Land, he was. From there, I noticed that some of the casualties were being brought back. I went over, and I was exhausted by then, and I laid down among them. And Yonkers said, he called me Raw Dick. Said, "Raw Dick, if you're hurt, I'm going to kill you." And then I hear medic again. And there were two guys injured. Well, one guy injured, one guy that just fell out in the lower paddy. And through all of this, I don't have any recollection of artillery. I don't have any recollection of you coming in, John. I have no recollection of gunships. I have no recollection of when the jets showed up. But I have some pretty good recollections that windscreen being blown out of that one chopper.
Yeah.
And the guys that I went to. I remember Boatner when he first filled up, and that day for me, because I went out to face my own death because I was so sure I was going to die. That was as close as I think I've ever come to being the man I hoped I'd be. so, and when I realized that I was alive, I never felt so alive as when I came out of that patty. And John, what I just would like to know from you is what it looked like from the air coming in.
Yeah. So John, so the ground is just a total mess, it sounds like, just horrible. So then John, you come in. I mean, how many other helicopters are coming in, to transport people out to hospitals or whatever?
Well, most of the aircraft that were there were the attack helicopters, and they were there for that mission, is to close air support. And as far as I know, I was the only HUEY that went in at that time. During that day, I flew 9.4 hours in that HUEY with Captain Clark, and made 71 takeoff and landings. So there was a lot of flying going on, and some of that could have been over to 2nd and 3rd Infantry also. But that short time I was in there, I think I just think I made one flight in there to get Captain Sellers and get the wounded out. And it was pretty quick. And then I think they got it under control somewhere, because I think it's probably slowed down if they brought fighter bombers in. And sometimes we had air traffic people that were Air Force that were forward air controllers. And we also made fighter strikes from our helicopter, but they were actually in control of the communication of it. But they would drop bombs just about everywhere, wherever they could. So, but it was pretty quick in aviation. That ground goes away pretty quick. So you're there and you spend the shortest amount of time on the ground as you can. And usually the crew will grab those people and pull them in, and there was no safety belts for them and all that kind of stuff. But with the HUEY that had the seats, you could fold the seats up and get a little bit of room to throw people on floor. So that's generally what happened. It wasn't a litter situation at all. They were on the floor itself. So it was, but
Mike, one of the things that scared me the most was toward the end. John talked about the jets coming in. They came toward the end, and they were targeting the same place that I was throwing hand grenades. And that was the scariest thing. They came out of nowhere, and all of a sudden just this burst of sound and firing all these, I think, several hundred rounds into 50 caliber rounds, and just right where I was throwing hand grenades, and they would just dive down and then straight back up. And I think that scared me about as much as anything. That was toward the end. And I think there was 2 of them, but
so how, if you're that close though, how do they avoid hitting, you?
Well, I think they had marking panels down. I think later Brian Burbaum had said that they put marking panels down for on the corners or whatever, that perimeter that we had. So I'm not sure. I just know it scared me, and
Yeah.
And they came in 4 or 5 times, and each time it scared me just as bad as the time before. So
Yeah, the one thing I also think about that particular day, that if that Claymore had gone off, and I don't know why it didn't, that Kilpatrick was trying to disarm, that I think it would have swept the patty of most of us. It might have malfunctioned, or might have hit the guy that was supposed to trigger it or whatever. But I think we were just extremely lucky that one piece of equipment malfunctioned.
Hey, John, so you're flying, I assume, for 9 straight hours, right? You're not taking breaks.
well, we had to refuel them every once in a while. So there were places that we knew where their fuel was available. We had it at our home base, and the 9th Infantry was at Bearcat, and they had fuel. We could get over there pretty quick. So the fueling sometimes was hot refueling. You landed, didn't shut the engine down, they opened it up and pumped fuel in. So they did hot refueling for quick turnaround.
John, you said 71 landings and 71 takeoffs. I mean, how do you do that? You're under fire. I mean,
Yeah, but it's not like that all over the place, you know, and it's pretty easy to get that many takeoff and landings, because if you look at what the brigade responsibility was, it was kind of up around Thompson and southeast of Saigon and around to the south over to Binchon, where the 2nd and 3rd Infantry was. So you were within, in a helicopter going 100 or 120 knots, you could be there pretty quickly. And most of it was, some of it was ash and trash, and some of it wasn't. Some of it was coordinating artillery fire. And we had an artillery battalion within the light infantry brigade. So they were kind of separate, and the reason a general was involved in a light infantry brigade is it was not attached to anything. So we worked with MACV, and they were very, after this incident was over, when the Tet offensive started, the 199th was heavily involved in the combat part of that. And that wasn't at this time, but it was coming.
But you're under fire, right? I mean, you're going in, taking guys out.
Well, yeah, you are when you're going in.
Right.
And a lot of times, you know, our machine gunners from the ones that are in the HUEYs have we have where they can fire left and right, pretty much cover you on the left side and the right side. And like I said, some of these guns were fixed where they could stand on the skid and use the gun. But sometimes they could just put them straight forward and shoot just like an airplane. But they were the trigger guys. And I can't remember those guys' names. I'm sorry about that too. I'm just
Yeah.
But they were there, and they came out of the aviation section.
Okay.
One of them was a crew member, and the crew member is a guy that took care of the aircraft, refueling it, daily maintenance to make sure it was ready to fly. And so they had their hands full. And the other guy was a gunner, but he also helped the crew chief take care of the aircraft. But it was their responsibility to keep the aircraft flying. And during the war, the Vietnam Helicopter Pilot Association said in their writing that there were 2,200 pilots killed during the war. So that includes probably the Marine Corps as well as the Army and maybe the Navy. And but anyway, that was kind of what they came up with in their book. And there was, I think, more crew members killed than that. I think it was about 2,700. So, and they lost a lot of machines.
Yeah.
A lot more than you'd think.
So Jim, you said your recollection was that what happened? A windshield was shot out?
Well, it was, I can't remember if it was just before or just after I got knocked down, but the fire was still intense. It was still absolutely crazy. And I see this chopper start to land right in the middle of the paddy, right where almost where cellars had been. And it came in slow. And I thought, that guy's crazy. And before it touched down, it looked like slow motion to me that the windscreen blew out instead of in. You'd think it would go in, but it looked like it blew out. And then the chopper took off.
That's very thin plastic.
Huh?
You know, it's very thin plastic. It's not bulletproof.
Well, it was amazing to me that whoever was piloting that thing thought that was a good idea to land right then and there.
Well, you don't know if the pilot might have been wounded,
Maybe.
possibly, or, the plexiglass got into his eyes or something. So
Maybe.
But I don't know. But I was told by the 120th from those guys from the Razorbacks that window had been shot out and to be careful, and they probably recommend it's not time to go in there. But
Yeah, well,
I said, we're going to go in there and get them.
Yeah, well, it's like I said, I don't have any record.
Yeah.
You had to have come in it was some bit after that.
Yeah.
But Daniel, I'd just like to say something to my old buddy Daniel Johns there, you know, who I
Yeah.
remember from all through our training in Fort Benning and all at Camp Shelby and on the Sultan and all that. And having not seen him all these years, it's really good to see you, Daniel Johns. So
You too, Jim. I remember you very well. I knew you were tall. What are you, about 6'4"?
yeah,
6'3"?
6'5". Yeah, I was 6'5". I'm about 6'4" now.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah, but I knew you were really tall, and I remember your face. I remember everything about you very well.
So Daniel, so, you know, based on Jim's observation, you were pretty injured. I mean, you were pretty hurt. So you get this.
Yeah, I had. Go ahead.
Go ahead, please.
Oh, I had this one large chunk of this Chicom grenade. It was 2 or 3 inches around. No. Yeah, but probably 2 or 3 inches out of an oblong shape.
Okay.
And it was buried. It hit me just to the left, on the left side of my spine. It missed my spine by centimeters, not inches, centimeters. I mean, miraculously at that time, there wasn't too much nerve damage. I did have some later on years that I was compensated for it. All right, I am being compensated now through the VA disability pension program. But anyway, that big one that hit me, that was the worst one. There are several more. There was one in my lower left calf, one in my lower right calf, and one on the left cheek of my butt that were removed at the 93rd Attack Field Hospital. And then I was there for a couple of days, and they shipped me out. They flew me up to Japan. They flew a whole jet load of us. I don't know what the name of the jet was, a C-5A or what, but it was huge. And it was converted into a hospital transport ship. It was full of just litters of wounded guys. And they took you out of there and flew you up to Japan because the environment up there was more adapted to healing and less, cleaner. And it wasn't near it was always so hot and humid in Vietnam, and, diseases and germs all over the place. So they flew me out up there, and I guess I was there a couple of months. And, I remember when they flew me in, they loaded me onto this other vehicle transport, and they're driving me around, and they unloaded me, and they set me on the inside. It was getting almost dark now. It's getting towards evening, and they set me down on the floor inside of this ward, this huge ward, and they just walked away and left. And I laid there, and pretty soon somebody come around and said, he was like in charge of the ward, and he said, "Get up, get to your bed." I said, I can't get up. And he pulled back the cover that was covering my back. And he said, "Oh, Jesus, get this guy out of here." So he called back for somebody they came and get me, and they took me to another ward where I stayed pretty much my whole time there until I was getting ready to get shipped back in country.
So you went back after those wounds?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Well, just to thanks for updating me on your wounds, because just to show you what a great medic I was, I believe that I didn't cover any one of your wounds with the bandage that I put on you.
That's what somebody always told me. So it looked like you were wearing a huge diaper.
Yes, well, that's kind of, yeah, well, it was so much, it was the blood and mud that confused me.
Yeah, because I heard that in one of our conversations, not from you, from another guy that made that comment that when they hauled me into the company CP that I looked like I was wearing a huge diaper. So
yeah, I was pretty proud of that bandage too. God.
Yeah, it must have done a job.
Daniel, how long
Yeah,
were you,
they sent me back. How long was I in Japan?
how long were you in the hospital? Yeah.
I was in for a while. I think probably close to 2 months. Right after I got there, the biggest surgery I had facing me there was closing the back wound because it was huge. It was big. And I talked to the doctor before, and he said, we're going to skin graft. We're going to take part of your skin from another area and see if we can graft the wound closed. Okay. Well, I went into the OR that day and woke up, and all I could feel was pain back there in that area. Just excruciating, horrible pain. I didn't know what was going on. And what they did, they had stitched me up and sewed it instead of skin grafting it. And they essentially pulled it tight like a snare drum and just stitched it up. And you know how that must have felt to all that area that wasn't used to that kind of stress. And yeah, it was bad. Then I spent, after that, I spent, I believe, 10 days in ICU, living on Demerol pain medications, injections, like every 4 hours, around the clock sometimes. Just, you know, and totally, at the end of that time, I was totally addicted to it. And when they sent me out of there, that was it. You were done, cold turkey. There was no withdrawal period. There was nothing. They sent me back to my original ward, the same bed I was in. And I laid there, I don't know how many days and nights looking at the ceiling. But I finally come out of it. I got it out of my system. That was kind of tough. That withdrawal period was, I know what drug addicts must go through now. And then after that,
they just sent you right back to Vietnam to start fighting.
The doctor there was a pretty cool guy. He said, you've got one other chunk of metal in your back above your original wound. He says, we can go in and take that out and we can buy you some more time here. And they said, we'll put you on a 30-day profile, which means you're limping, you're on a profile, you're not eligible for active duty. And he did that. He went in and took out another piece. And then they sent me to Camp Zama, Japan. And I was there a few days, and I went to the commander of the section that I was in. I said, send me back to country. I said, I'm not putting up with this shit. They just treated us horribly. And I think it was designed to do that, to get rid of us, send them back to country. I mean, you know, here we are, we're wounded combat veterans, and they're treating us like a bunch of basic trainees, the NCO staffing and the officers and everything. I think it was by design. And I think I played right into their hands by saying, drop my profile and send me back, because that's what they did. And I wasn't going to put up with that. You know, I'd have probably gone off on somebody if I stayed there very long. But yeah, then they sent me back sometime in, I believe, late June. I rejoined the company.
And how much longer were you in Vietnam?
I was in Vietnam until October 6th of 1967 was when I left country. I flew out. When they sent me back from Japan, first sergeant, who I hated, I think everybody did, Froelich, yeah. But anyway, he said, you're going to the third platoon. I was in the first platoon. I said, I want my old squad back. I said, if I'm going anywhere, I want to go to the first platoon, third squad, the men that I knew, the guys I knew that I was used to. The third platoon, and Jim, I don't know if you were aware of this as much as I was, there was a lot of just no account losers in that platoon. Just troublemakers, worthless, wouldn't listen to anybody. and he only sent me over there to try to shake them up. But the only thing he accomplished by doing that was making me not care about anything at all anymore except getting home. That's all I cared about. I didn't care about any of their missions or what they were or nothing. I just wanted one thing, and that was to stay alive. And I did everything in my power to do that. I would just shy away from ambush patrol positions that they sent me on, me and my squad, because I didn't like the looks of them. They were too dangerous. I'd go somewhere else, hole up for the night. We switch on and off. Daylight, for guard, we switch on and off the guard. The rest of us slept. Daylight, we picked up, moved back to the company. If I did everything in my power not to jeopardize my safety or the safety of anybody with me. I just wouldn't go. I was not a program follower at that time.
Yeah. So John, you're 9 hours, but how long did the whole firefight take? I mean, are we talking about hours? Are we talking about 1 hour? What's just
But the firefight on the ground?
Yeah.
I don't know, because I left, and probably once I dropped those guys off, there was other people calling for, help also.
Yeah.
That when I left there, I don't believe I went back in there. No,
I believe it was about
it's
5.
possible that I did, but because of we had so many different operations going on that I can't really remember, other than dropping Captain Sellers off and the fellows. They picked them up, and I told Jim that the last thing I saw you guys on the ground is you were loading Sellers on, and I remember a white band around his belly, and a bullet, a blood at one spot on the bandage, and then on his backside too. But I think it was wrapped to where you could see him, and he kind of got on by himself.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. I mean, it was amazing. And he came to see me some months later. He was, stationed in the rear, and so was I.
Yeah.
He came by. I always appreciated it, and he thanked me for bandaging him up that day. And the one thing that he said to me that I have trouble relating to also is it didn't hit anything vital. Now, how a bullet can travel right through your guts and come out your back.
Yeah, I heard it was a steel bullet. It was a homemade bullet.
Well, it was all kinds of stuff hanging out his back that looked kind of like guts to me, but what do I know,
Yeah, he's fortunate. But I'll tell you what, the next day, after I dropped him off, I went back and went in there and saw him and talked to Sellers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the company was never the same after he left it. It was, everything changed, but I learned so much from his leadership from Benning on.
I talked to him. I gave him a call, and he wasn't there. And his wife said he's not here right now. And I said, I think he probably would like to talk to me. So anyway, about the time I was getting ready to hang up, he drove in, and I got him on the line, and then I talked to him. But I met him on the Sultan. He was on that Sultan ship when it went into Untitled. We went into Okinawa for a short period of time. Were you on that?
Yeah, I wasn't allowed to get off the ship. I'd had some problems with the MPs, but yes, I was there.
You weren't in the brig in the front of that thing, were you?
No, I was confined to the bunks.
Yeah, but they had I got in trouble too, because they said, we're going to take all these people off the boat. We're going to march them in Okinawa, because they've been on that boat for 10 days or something. And then I was kind of the special services guy, that they hooked me with that little job when I got on there. So they said they were going to do that. So I got a pass, and I left the boat, and I went at the officers club where the chaplains were, and we were at the bar. And then they found out they couldn't do the march. So they wanted something for these troops to do. And Okinawa was set up for that. So on the way back to the ship, I met the sergeant that was in charge of all that stuff. And he said, we've got bowling alleys, we've got baseball mitts and all that kind of stuff. So the troops could get out there and do some physical exercise, and then had a beer hall. So
that's where most of us went.
And I got back to the boat, and I told Colonel Rykoff was really steaming because he was kind of in charge of the boat and all that kind of stuff. And he said, well, what are we going to do with him? I said, I got it taken care of. Just turn them loose.
Unbelievable.
So,
Well, I did take care of your bunk while you were on Okinawa, Daniel.
what's that? We only stayed there for a short period of time.
I guarded Daniel John's bunk while he was
Oh, did you?
Yeah, we all lit out for the beer hall.
Yeah,
Yeah, we had I believe we had 4 hours
yeah.
to get of leave there, shore leave. And we went to the beer hall. They took, my company was on KP there, or my platoon, I think, was on KP that day. They used a whole platoon at a time on KP over this, such a big operation.
Yeah.
And I was in what they call the scullery. You remember what that was, Jim? That awful steam bath where you were cleaning pots and pans and it was just steam in there. Well, I was in there, and then 4 hours later, I came back there so drunk I could hardly stand up, and right back into that scullery. And I don't think it took more than about a half hour to sweat all of that beer out of me. But yeah, they sent us right back to where we were before we left the ship, but it was fun.
So Lee, you said it was about 5 hours for the
I think it
firefight?
was 4 or 5 hours. Yeah. Normally a firefight was probably 30 minutes or less, maybe 20, 30 minutes. This one was was 4 or 5 hours at least. And
Yeah, I have the after action report, the daily log.
Yeah.
That I think it was about 4 or 5 hours. I could look it up. I still have the daily log. I just don't have access to it at the moment. But from the time that it first started until the jets had left.
Yeah.
So it was about 4 or 5 hours. But the first, I don't know how long it was, but the intensity of the fire was more than anything I'd experienced any other firefight that I was in Vietnam. But it was the visuals. Just one thing I'd like to share. John, you talked about getting in contact with Cap Sellers. I had got his phone number some years ago, and I called up, and his wife answered the phone, and she said that she didn't want him talking to me because he would get too depressed. I said, look, the guy retired as a colonel.
That's right. I talked to him.
Yeah, can't he make the decision himself, whether he wants to talk to me or not? So I did get to talk to him. I actually had lunch with him and his wife one day. So
Colonel Rykoff was a guy who called him to see if he would be a company commander in his unit. And that's kind of where they came from. But he was a VP with a trucking outfit that's
Dominion.
Old Dominion, yeah. But anyway, he continued, and he was in a couple of other battles, and he said he thought he was done because a jet fighter, they go so fast, and it's a millisecond between 100 yards or 200 yards if you drop a bomb. You don't release just right electrically, it's a short bomb maybe. So he said he got blown out and it kind of knocked him cuckoo. But he said it was either they bring it in that close or they were going to die anyway. That's what he told me. But that wasn't at this operation. It was further in his career someplace.
Yeah, I think he was got assigned as a company commander with the 101st.
Yeah. So I haven't seen him since then, and but I knew him on the ship, but just not like I knew the aviators and some of the Ford air controllers. We had about 4 or 5 of them on board that were Air Force guys.
Right.
And And we had, a bunch of other people that were, I think 1,700 infantry guys on that boat.
Yeah, I think you had tablecloths on your tables at mess.
We did. But they had one of those Army captains that was a medical guy, and
Uh-huh.
they became they became automatic officers when they got out of medical school.
Right.
So when they had a captain's bar on, they thought they were double first lieutenant. They didn't know they were captains.
Oh, yeah.
But I saw them when we dropped those bodies off. They went crazy. I mean, not this time, but the time before.
Yeah.
They never expected to see that kind of stuff.
So I want to wrap this up, and we can think about doing another session, which I'd love to do. But I'd all like you to say a few final words, either about this firefight or whatever you'd like. I mean, that's fine with me. So, Jim, can you start us off?
Well, I just like to thank all of you for showing up. I mean, this is the best reunion I've been to. It just means a lot to me that I got to participate and meet you guys.
Well, last time I saw you, you were loading somebody on a helicopter.
Like I said,
And somebody there was Mr. Johns was there. So
Yeah.
yeah,
much closer than that now, but I wasn't, I was in the dirty infantry, but I was available to be in the dirty infantry. That's what
you were very much appreciated by all.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I know I came in sometime in those helicopters, and we came in fast, and we didn't tarry to stay in there. And I remember I came in one time when they were eating, and they had all these paper plates and these thermite containers for their food. And I made a dust bowl, and all those things blew everywhere, and they weren't happy with me.
No, I'm still spitting dust out, but that's a whole other story.
And I picked up somebody else that was out there, and he got bit by a bug, some kind of something they didn't know, and he was going into fever. And this was, I think, probably over near Bearcat, and it could have been your unit.
It may have been. We had a guy, it was not in my platoon, but got stung by a scorpion.
That's
But
it. And it came down through the trees. You guys had chopped those trees down as much as you could.
Yes,
I
possibly.
came down into it, but I couldn't land because the stumps were still there. I don't even know how you cut those things anyway.
Well, the guy got stung by a scorpion, and his medic gave him a shot of morphine, which was the wrong thing to do. So it slowed down his breathing. He went in, I don't even know if he came back to the platoon.
We got in there and got him out of there and took him up to the hospital.
Yeah.
But, that's, like I said, it's not that far away. You go down those highways sometimes, like the Vung Tau and into Saigon from
That would have been right around Christmas.
That
would have been around Christmas.
Everywhere along that road.
Yeah.
And at nighttime, we did H&I fires all the time, harassing introductory fires,
Right.
artillery fires everywhere. So there's a lot of look like the moon out there in places.
Yeah, it did.
How about you, Daniel?
It was great to reconnect with all you guys. I really appreciate it. If you're like me, you probably don't open up and tell these stories to anybody except other veterans. There's something we're kind of known for is keeping to ourselves. I think a lot of Vietnam veterans are that way. And I've had people tell me, never knew you were in Vietnam. I said, I never told you. And that was just it. I said, people you hear about going around bragging about being in Vietnam, they weren't the real Vietnam veterans. They might have been truck drivers or company clerks or something. I mean, everybody had their job. That was fine. But stay away from the stolen valor part. I don't go for that. So I said, yeah, that's it. I said, real Vietnam veterans, the real ones, don't share this stuff with hardly anybody ever. So it's kind of nice to get together with you guys and see all of you share that. The only thing I regret, I never did. I was flown out of there by you, John, and my buddy Andy Anderson from South Carolina. You might remember him, Jim, a little guy. He was in my squad, and he told me that when it was the end of the firefight, they had to get out of there because they were going to bomb the whole area. They were just going to light it up and just the whole area. I never heard of anyone going back to that site like the next day or any time thereafter, looking at what was left over. I had never heard about any of that. I don't know if anything was ever done like that. And that was kind of what piqued my interest. What did it look like the next day? And I never got to find out. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, they did B-52 strikes like that and blew up whole.
I don't know if they were B-52s that were coming in, or they were just a bunch of those F-100s that were going to just come in and gangbang the whole place.
They can do that too, but they did it. They came in there with 10 or 12 B-52s, and they just saturated an area completely.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be there either.
Yeah, it wasn't, you didn't want to be there.
Hey, thank you, Daniel. How about you?
Mike, if I could, I'd like to echo what they said. John and Dan, really good to see you. And Jim, I've seen Jim, and we communicate some, but pretty much for about 47 years, I did nothing in regards to Vietnam. And then I got really interested about 6 years ago. And but I would kind of agree with what they said. I've got a couple of little quick things. John and I are kind of connected by when I got home from Vietnam, my mother had cut out of the local paper an article about the firefight of April 23rd. And a guy by the name of John Honaker had received the Air Medal for his actions that day. And at the time, I didn't even realize that was connected. I kept it for all those years. And recently I found out that I found through the internet, I found John, and we're connected by, he went through the ROTC program here at East Tennessee State University here in Johnson City. And of course was commissioned there. And that was, I believe, was it 62 or something? You graduated from?
Yeah, 1962, that's right.
62. But anyway, I was about a year later then in 63, I was in that same ROTC program. So we're connected there from that newspaper article. And I found John and called him, and we've talked half a dozen times maybe over the last 4 or 5 years. But one more thing on the firefight of the 23rd is we had, I believe it was 6 casualties and only 1 KIA. And of course, that was Corporal George Harrison. And so about a year ago, Jim Rothblatt was contacted from a high school English student in Austin, Texas, about Corporal George Harrison. And he was assigned this project to find out about what happened to George Harrison. So anyway, Jim contacted me, and we were in contact with Beck Wiltshire, and he ended up doing this video on Corporal Harrison. So anyway, I thought that was a unique little thing there.
Yeah, and you shared that with me. I got to see it. So.
Right, I've shared that, I believe, with everybody, but that happened about a year ago, and that was actually the second thing. We were contacted by another high school student about another guy, one of our guys that were killed over, Edward Miller, and it's been 3 or 4 years ago, and the same type thing. He was in Indiana high school history project, I believe, and he had been assigned the name of Edward Miller, and he found Jim, and Jim contacted me, and through him we were able to find some of Miller's relatives, including his wife and whatnot, and share things with them. So it's really, really interesting.
Mike, I got a question for you.
Go ahead, Daniel.
What's going to be done with this interview? Are we going to be able to see this or have access to it, or what kind of
Yeah,
publishment?
I'll tell you after we stop recording. John,
Okay.
do you have any final words, John, that you want to say?
No, I think that's about it. But my part of that is probably a very small part, but it's a part I always remember.
Oh no, it wasn't. Not to me, it wasn't.
Getaway driver.
Well, they didn't hit the aircraft with anything, so we kept on flying. So.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, thank you all so much. Thank you for your service. For me, you're living history, which is great. I can read books, but I get to talk to all of you and find out really what happened on the ground. So thank you all so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Mike.
Mike.